Hey there. Today we're talking about text editors for writing code. But before we get to that, I want to show you how it relates to writing an essay in a Word document editor like Google Docs or Microsoft Word. Because in order to understand text editors, you have to first understand that they're very similar to just writing an essay in English in a Word document editor and then sharing it with somebody else. And then once we're done with that, I'm going to show you how we actually download a text editor and then use it to create a file. First, we'll use it to create an HTML file, which is how we create websites using HTML, CSS, JavaScript. But first, we'll just look at how to download the text editor and then how to create a file and write some HTML in it. But before we get to that, let's look at our Word document in Google Docs. So we have a Word document here. We're going to write some English. Hey, let's write an essay. So we wrote an essay. It's a very short essay, but an essay nonetheless. Well, we actually forgot to give it a name. So our first essay, that's the name of this document. So now that we have it, we can hit Command S or Control S to save it. And then once we save it, we can go ahead and let's say print it out. And then once we have it printed out, we give it to our professor or to whoever wanted it. The same thing with Microsoft Word or any other document editor. You can write an essay in English, or you can write it in French, or you can write it in Spanish, right? You can write it in any language that you want that somebody else can understand. But when it comes to text editors for coding, we want to write code that a computer can understand, right? And once that code is written, then we publish it to the internet for everyone to see. Whoever we want to see, we can publish it to the internet. So in order to write that code, we need a text editor. And there are many options. So one of the most popular ones these days is Visual Studio Code. You might have heard of it if you're learning how to code. But there's other options like Sublime Text, which I used very early on, almost a decade ago now when I was learning how to code, and actually more than a decade. And there's Notepad++, which is a very simple text editor without all the bells and whistles, but it gets the job done. And you can use any of these. It's up to you what you use. My favorite these days is Visual Studio Code. So let's go ahead and download the Visual Studio Code for Mac, or if you're on Windows, of course, there's other options. You can download for Windows or Linux, but I'm on Mac, so I'm going to download it for Mac, right? I hit that. It downloads, and once it's done downloading, I can open it. Fortunately, I already have it downloaded and opened up, so let's go to Visual Studio Code, right? And now we're here. This is the text editor, but it's not really much going on. All it says is, welcome to Visual Studio Code, editing evolve. That's just their tagline. And it says start. And we can start by creating a new file or opening a folder of code files. Or we can clone a Git repository or connect to something else. And these are my recents, but you can't see that right now because I'm hiding them. But in any case, we have the option to create a new file or to open a folder. For now, we don't have a folder to open, so let's just create a new file. And we'll call this our first file.html. And we'll save it to this folder, which is called text editor. And here it is. We have a document. Again, much like in our Word document, we have a document. We gave it a name, our first essay, and we can write some stuff. So it's the same thing here. We have our first file here, our first HTML file. We gave it a name called first file, and we can write some HTML. So we can just type HTML. We can type head, and we can give it a title. First file, or let's call it first website. And then we can give it a body. And we can say, hello world. Of course, let's put that in a paragraph so that we can be syntactically correct. And we can do more stuff. We can give it an image, but we don't want to do that right now. There's many more stuff we can do, but for now, let's just keep it simple. We have our document. It says first website, hello world. And now if we open this in our folder, we have first file. And let's go ahead and, of course, open it in Google Chrome. And we can see hello world. And the title of the website is called, if we close these, it's called first website. So that's what we did. We created a HTML file and we gave it a title of first website and we gave it some content, hello world. And then we command saved, right? Command S or Control S, depending on where your machine is. And now that it's saved, we can open it in a browser. And later on, we'll learn how to open it, how to share with the world by publishing it online using GitHub and Heroku and other publishing sites where you can share your code with the world for them to use it, like how Facebook.com is published online for you to use. The same way with Google.com. Somebody wrote it in their text editor right here, and then they saved it and published it to the internet for everyone to use. One day we'll get to that, but for now, I just want to show you how we use a text editor. So this is one of the very first things you have to learn if you want to start writing code. You need to write it somewhere. So this is your text editor. And let's say we want to close this and close this. We can now go to File, Open Folder, and we can actually open this entire folder of our text editors. So now in the left side here, we can see our first HTML file. We can actually go ahead and right click and do new file and say styles.css. And now if we go ahead in our styles.css, we can write some code. We can target the body and say background is red. And then in our HTML, we can go to the head, which is how we tell the HTML information about this document. So the first bit of information was the title of the document. But from there, we can do more. We can bring in styles, which is what CSS is, cascading style sheets. We can bring that in and say, hey, let's link to our equals style sheet. And we can say href equals styles.css. And now that we have that saved, we can go to our document here and Command R or Control R to refresh the page, or just press this button here. We can see that our HTML document now has a background of red. The body of our HTML is now red. We can make that gold if we want, and we can go here and refresh and it's gold. So now we know how to create an HTML file to create a website, right? Create the contents of a website. And we can also create a CSS file to add some styling to that HTML document, that website, such as making the background red or yellow, gold, whatever we want. We can make the font size big or small. We'll learn more about this HTML and CSS later in more detail, but for now I just want to show you how we create files and link them together using our text editor, specifically for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So next is JavaScript. What if we want to add a file that creates some functionality? And that's what JavaScript's for. JavaScript adds the functionality to your HTML. So we can go here to our folder and say new file, and we can type in script.js, which is JavaScript. We can write whatever script we want. And so we can say, let's write a function, and it will say handle click. And we can say on a click, we'll just do an alert. We'll say, hello, I was clicked. And now that we have our JavaScript file, we can go back to our HTML and write script and give it the source, which is our script.js, and that's it. And now we can use that function in here on click. We can say handle click, just like that, and click me. And now we have a button in our HTML, so we can go to our website and Command R, and when we hit click me, we see, hello, I was clicked. So that's our JavaScript running. So we now have our text editor. We made a file called firstfile.html. We added some CSS by creating another file called style.css and adding some CSS to it, which is a very simple CSS. Again, this is not, the point of this video is not to go into the details of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's just to show you how to create these files in a text editor and edit them and save them and then see them in your browser. And so now we have our style.css. We put it in our HTML using the link, and we also created a JavaScript file called script.javascript, so we can write a JavaScript, right? And we linked it to our HTML again, and we used the function that we wrote in our JavaScript file to create a button that once it's clicked says, hello, I was clicked. And that's it. So we can of course add more to our folder here, we can create a new folder inside of that folder and call it images and add some images there. But we'll get into all of that later. There's a lot more to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but now you know how to create a file in a text editor, you know how to download it, and you know how to save your file, and you know how to view it in your browser. And just to stress again, you get to choose which text editor you want to use. I'm using VS Code, Visual Studio Code. That's my preference, but you can use Sublime Text, or you can use Notepad++, or you can use IntelliJ, WebStorm. There's so many other options out there. It's all up to you. This is just what the most popular one is right now in web development, so that's what I'm using, and I enjoy it. So you don't have to use it, but that's what I always recommend. That's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been helpful. And if it has, subscribe and comment below. Leave me a comment for what you would like me to cover in the future, and I will do my best to get to that. That's all for now. I'm Lincoln, and I'll see you in the next one.